Good vibes and thick thighs, everybody. I saw that on a bumper sticker on my way in. It's, I don't know what day. It's the 31st. It's Halloween. Happy Halloween.
It's going to be decidedly less controversial than Microsoft's Halloween memos of yore.
Krista, you're definitely not in the thick thighs.
No, I'm not.
So I don't know why.
But someone else, they had it on their car. They also had a girl boss sticker on their car. So
the other one you see a lot is thick thighs save lives, and I don't understand how.
I guess just because you like them. I don't know.
Maybe they're strong enough to like lift a car off somebody.
Explain, chat, in the comments below.
I wanted to get a cowbell for the Halloween episode because I knew we weren't going to do the dress up as a costume and just be like, hey, there's more cowbell. So you just have to pretend there's more cowbell.
Oh, yeah. I was also going to try to like think of something for Halloween, but I ended up having to run around with my head cut off a little bit this morning, so I didn't get a chance to.
Oh, looks like you got it back on nicely.
I did, yeah. Just in time for Halloween. I should have done it headless.
But yeah, wouldn't Halloween be the day?
Yeah, you'd want to do. Did you see someone did like a headless horseman thing?
Yeah.
That was really cool.
Yeah, they were right.
I don't know how they did it because it looked like it was accurate.
Where did they do this?
It was just on the internet. There was a video of a guy
on a
dressed
black
up.
horse.
Yeah.
You know, it was nice. It was well done.
Some people put a lot of effort into Halloween.
Yeah.
It's a long way to go for that short reward, but you know, whatever, you do you. And the White House is going to continue to do things that put them in more control of our lives. And one of the things that we're all worried about these days is AI destroying society.
The headline is White House to unveil sweeping AI executive order next week. But the executive order has almost nothing to do with AI. It's really just a footnote about how government employees would be permitted to use AI as part of their job. Like, can you use ChatGPT? Be careful about pasting stuff. It's actually a lot more about other things to do with technology.
But you will have to conform to certain standards for the government to use your AI. And since the government is such a huge customer, it's kind of a rule that's not really a rule.
Would you say that's a monopoly in a way?
The worst monopoly.
One thing I was looking for specifically is usually this kind of legislation comes out. You think about like all the stories that we do on the spyware stuff, like the iPhone spyware. Usually, this kind of an executive order is some kind of a spyware. It's like they're telegraphing how they might buy a product like that. It's like, oh well, if you had a product that could remotely root an iPhone and give us this data in a privacy respecting safety kind of a way, we might buy that product. That's usually what these kinds of things are, but I didn't get a read from this as to how it could be weaponized that way yet.
Well,
it's there.
If an AI comes out and it doesn't restrict what the White House wants them to restrict, then the government will not allow it to be used in any sort of government contracting.
Did you see anything in there? You know, the thing that we reported on in Detroit, the AI face recognition that just constantly gets it wrong and causes brown people to be arrested, which is terrible. I got the feeling that there was some stuff in there that is like, oh, you come up with an AI product that can do the pre-crime thing. We're going to, just as long as it follows these rules, we might consider buying it. It's like,
we're not going to verify if it follows those rules, but you should say that it does.
I think this is more about the language models.
Yeah.
I think this is more about controlling what the language models will say to people.
Yeah. Interesting. You a whistleblower? Do you want to tell us what the dark, sinister motive of that is? I don't know.
Leave it in a YouTube comment.
I think it's pretty obvious. It's to control speech, even when it's not human speech. And throughout the country, we have these little areas that the government designates for like, oh, this area is going to be really good at this. Our area here that we're in, our thing is poverty.
We're good at that.
Used to be coal, but now it's just poverty.
We also have an area for serious drug problem. But we do not have one of these.
No.
You see, our poor state is not pink in this graph.
Tennessee also out.
The White House announces 31 tech hubs to focus on AI, clean energy, and more. Now, Tennessee is actually surprising because they have Silicon Holler. Like, they actually did build a tech hub and were in the news a number of years ago and brought a bunch of companies in.
And they have a lot more, like, larger cities. Like, I would think, like, I can kind of see why you wouldn't choose Kentucky because we don't have a lot of big cities, but Tennessee kind of does.
We had there are some tech-minded people here. There's just not enough of us. Like, we built a data center in a place where the power was basically free because we didn't want to shut the power plant down, which is a wise and prescient thing to do. But then the data center was mining Bitcoin with the spare electricity. So Win some, you lose some.
Anyway, if you're in one of those areas, maybe there'll be some jobs coming in, some sweet government money.
It didn't really say a whole lot about like what they were going to be doing. They're just like, we're just going to give money to these different companies. In these
That's
different
always the
states.
way it goes.
Yeah, and it's like, well, what about how? What are the details?
Now, if we think back to the Twitter files and the Facebook files, which weren't widely covered, we did talk about them here. The government, especially the White House, was basically just elbow deep in social media, controlling what they say, sending them angry memos when things come out that they don't like. And some sane judge got a look at that and said, no, you can't do this. It's just the government controlling speech. You can't do this. And then our good old Supreme Court stepped in.
The Supreme Court blocks restrictions on Biden administration efforts to get platforms to remove social media posts. So they are blocking restrictions.
Which means they're back to controlling all the social media. And we, this is a bad week, or last week was a bad week for Europe because they got a horrible draconian new law. And this is one of the few, we've had these kinds of things come up in the past. We've managed to bat them back barely. You guys did not succeed this time. I'm sorry. But we still have our own attempts to keep doing this kind of thing.
Kids Online Safety Act will censor the news. So now that it's in the UK, it's coming here. Don't worry, we're going to talk about it in the UK in just a minute. So yeah.
So this is all about teenagers. Social media makes them sad, makes them do some things that might be things we don't want them to do. So what's the answer? Censorship, obviously. That's always the answer.
I always try to think about these kind of problems in the context of the 24th century, and it's like, what would this problem look like in a world with holodecks? And it's just like
People jumping off the holodecks.
You thinking that 24th century is going to be holodecks and not slave world? It's so optimistic.
and not
Not
water.
Warhammer.
It's going to be Warhammer, not Star Trek. Yeah, that's where we're going. And this story is a perfect lead-in for that, right? Because this is not the kind of thing that the Federation of Planets would be going into.
Inside ICE's database for finding derogatory online speech. Yeah, this is not a process that's running in the background on the enterprise computer. This is looking for things where people might have an ill opinion of the United States in social media. And
My favorite part was there's like a graph of like how it works, and it's very like corporate feeling. It's like someone had to prepare this for a slide deck, didn't they?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you read this, think about this in the context of the executive order
There
that's
it is.
coming on AI. Because, yeah, this is the giant oak thing. A lot of people have reported it. There's a lot of misreporting on this, which I think is clouding some of the insidious nature of this. Is there any, like, I mean, I'm hopelessly optimistic with the 24th century, but I look at stuff like this and I think was this conceived with optimistic intent at all? Like, how could it have been?
Well, there is certainly with the geopolitical situation we're in now, there's an element of practicality to this in the sense that there are for sure people in this country right now who want to do us harm. And should things get worse in a certain part of the world, that may activate them. So the idea, I think, on paper is if you're here and you're talking crap about this country, yeah, we should get rid of you. Why are you here?
Or at least be on the radar. It's like
I
this
guess.
this guy did a whole bunch of bad things and there was absolutely no warning, and then you
But-
dig into it and it's like, oh.
There's a
But-
lot of warning.
Yeah.
There is no radar because they shouldn't be here, right? They're already illegally here. So the idea is, yeah, if we think that you're doing bad things, then, or you're maybe going to do some bad things, we're going to go ahead and put you at the front of the line.
I don't think if you're here legally or illegally should really exclude this, because there's a lot of crazy people on both sides.
Well, no, everything should exclude this because they shouldn't be spying on us like this.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, it's
Citizen or no, you're right. I don't want anybody just peeking at my social media to be like, put them on a list.
I'm not defending it, but I'm saying I think that's the argument.
the intent. Yeah.
You're probably on a list
Yeah.
because of your social media, that post about McConnell,
At this
which
point-
did make me laugh, to be fair.
At this point, I would kind of be disappointed if I'm not.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, if it's people who hate the government and kind of want to destroy it,
It's really not even the government. It's the idiocy. Like what? Like we are.
What do you think that Venn diagram looks like?
It's just one circle.
It's like just the thing that was so amazing, and maybe this is like I think that my idea of a functional, amazing society that is marching toward something that's utopian is people that are interested and concerned with making the world a better place for everyone. Like we have the power to do that. We should do that through laws and through collective action and through yeah.
How does any of that make Raytheon's stock price go up?
Yeah.
Line doesn't go up then. I hate
Well,
it here.
there is one line that's going up, and it's going up pretty sharply, and that is average rent in the United States. And part of that, of course, is due to horrible government mismanagement and money printing. But that's not the only thing, because we've learned that a lot of these rental companies have a secret weapon.
The DOJ has filed a notice of potential participation in the RealPage lawsuit. RealPage is a company where landlords could get together and collude, basically, on prices for renting stuff in a given area. And it's like, okay, you don't want to rent from this person. What are you going to do? Go somewhere else? All right. Well,
They're also the same price. Like, let's all keep our rent at like $1,000 a month, regardless of whether or not the market supports it.
Yeah. And this also has fueled consolidation of a lot of rental properties. Like this kind of thing was inconceivable 50 or 100 years ago because there weren't like one landowner didn't own that many
All the
units.
properties.
But now you have large conglomerated companies moving into even smaller communities and buying up all the rental properties. And just like commercial office space, they're fine if 30% of the commercial office space is unoccupied if the profit margin is that insane on the property that is occupied.
Interesting that it was unthinkable 50 years ago, but not 500 years ago. That's where we're going back to, isn't it?
So yeah, the federal government's interested in that, and they're like, yeah, we might tag team in on that lawsuit.
Again, if we all had just this insatiable level of curiosity to just be like, so show me how this works. Like, explain it to me. Like, I would like to see this out in the open and exposed to sunlight. I think a lot more people would be like, wait a minute, this is a scam.
Well, we've been talking about the level 1 bingo cards and things that might be on there. I think we forgot a very important one, which is never let a crisis go to waste.
Oh,
Never let a crisis go to
we've got
waste.
like 20 things on it now.
It comes up so constantly, and there's no better example.
Citing the keyword that definitely is causing bad things right now in the algorithm, the U.S. wants to officially treat crypto anonymity services as suspected money launderers. Because of course they do. And conveniently, this was already ready to go. It wasn't like some revelation where it's like, oh man, we could have caught this sooner if this global event thing didn't happen. And then now it has. It's like, oh, we need to put a stop to this.
Yeah, the key like quote in this article was like someone saying they had this ready within 10 days of this kicking off. There's no way that they did it in response to that.
We've got another story later about be careful where your remote workers physically are when you hire them. And mentally, if you read this one, I want you to read the other one. And then mentally, I want you to reconcile those two things because they're the same thing. It's like, oh, you're contributing. It's like, well, you hired one of these people that is apparently on the naughty list to do your remote IT work. That's the same argument.
Wired points out that they actually know, to some degree, how much of the global problem that is coin mixing is coming from the current thing, and it's laughably small.
Yeah.
They're actually not even laundering that much money. They don't really have a lot of money, honestly. It's really mostly just people trying to avoid this kind of spying, but they're like, no, it's all the same. It's all terrorism.
Like North Korea.
And it must be destroyed.
Like North Korea is using Dogecoin. So we should, okay. They're also using cash and, what about HSBC? HSBC's like under the umbrella of everything outlined in this thing, HSBC has been caught doing worse. And it's like, oh, we should do something to redo the leadership in HSBC. That's not a thing that anybody has ever said.
It's definitely a bingo square.
I was thinking too, like instead of bingo, what if we just made it a drinking game?
I think it's so. Yeah, I mean, it does suck to have to repeat yourself, but at the same time, when you first hear it, it's like, that seems crazy and outlandish. And then maybe over time you start accumulating points in your brain of like, oh, Oh, there's another point in that column. Oh, there's another square for that
Call that
bingo.
radicalization.
Well,
Oh, when you see the stories week after week, it's like, oh.
repetition does have an incredible effect on our minds, which is why advertising uses it so effectively, which is depressing.
Store.level1text.com. Store.level1text.com.
And robocalls continue to be a thing. It seems like maybe they're a little less now, but they're still happening, and we still don't have a good solution to get rid of them. So we're just trying to think outside the box here, I guess.
U.S. Senate begins collecting evidence on how AI could thwart robocalls. Witnesses called for greater action of the SEC and other government agencies. I mean, the obvious answer is microtransactions for everything, but that's also inches us a little closer to the dystopia, doesn't it?
One of the ways in there that they were talking about, they didn't have a lot of good ideas, but one of the ways they were talking about is like, hey, you know what? We do have all of these backed up proposals from these telecoms on how they're going to deal with the robocalling. And we've been looking at those recently, and some of them might not be up to standard. Could we get an AI to look at those since the humans aren't doing it?
The most insane robocall mitigation plans the telcos filed with the FCC. The FCC received blank pages, a Windows printer test page, and a quote-unquote indiscernible object.
They took it like they were like, let's make sure everyone understands.
So
I think under the Ajit Pai FCC, he would have used this to be like, hey, we've got thousands of pages of proposals from companies to solve this problem, just as like a prop, and the current FCC is having none of that.
So they got the worst offenders here. Now, if you file this, the telecoms know that it's going to be bureaucratic hell and nobody's ever going to look at it, or at least not for a long time. So they can buy themselves months of continued robocalls just by filing something stupid, and no one ever looks at it.
We talk a lot about dystopia, but like the dystopia of just bureaucracy like that, it's just, what a waste of everyone's time, effort.
We failed as a society when there exists an incentive structure that causes this to happen in the first place.
And one of those agencies that has now been re-enabled to go back to controlling social media was the CISA, the cybersecurity thing. I can't
The
remember.
Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency.
So they, for a while, were stopped. Now they will be restored to their former power, but some people are fighting them.
Conservatives are increasingly knives out for the nation's top cybersecurity agency. There's not a lot of new information here other than it's just, pork barrel spending, blah, blah, blah. But the whole, like, it all goes back to the OPM hack. How do we...
Bingo.
Yeah.
Drinking game.
How do we prevent that? Like, we knew. We did nothing to stop it. Solar winds, we knew. We did nothing to stop it. How do we close the loop here? If I got an email from, security dude at, CISA.gov, and it's like, hey, by the way, we're getting some chatter on the dark web that blah, blah, blah. You might want to, like, take a close look at stuff. Probably pay attention to that. Like, but that's not what they're proposing building here, which is a problem, I think.
It's also not the kind of email they would send you. They'd be like, hey, we don't like what you're saying.
You think they'd send that over email, or would they just show up at your house?
I mean, there's so much opportunity to turn it into a huge honeypot. Like, what if the feds swoop in and it's like, okay, look, Solar Winds has been super compromised. We're going to turn this into a giant honeypot, but we're going to help you, like, execute that so they don't know that it's a honeypot. So we switch them off of your real infrastructure onto your honeypot infrastructure. That would be amazing. That would be, like, the kind of, like, government business working together for the common good that we need, not what we got.
Well, what we got is closing in on hyperinflation, and it's a bad time. It's an especially bad time if you made a multi-year fixed cost contract with the United States government.
Air Force One debacle. Boeing has now lost more than $1 billion on each of the president's 2 new jets. It's because they're taking a long time to get them put together, obviously.
And all the raw materials are at least
Much more
double what they
expensive.
used to cost.
Of course, I think Boeing is probably exaggerating here. They're probably a couple of $100 million over budget. hoping that the government feels bad for them. It's like, well, we'll give you an extra couple $100 million. Okay.
Aren't they also over their time limit?
Yeah.
So that would make me less inclined to give them more money. I'd be like, you didn't even deliver on time.
You really don't want software bugs on the presidential jet?
I guess.
I think until the budget is balanced, the president should be flying commercial.
I had this thought while I was reading this article where I was like, can you imagine a world where like we had a president who gets on that jet for the first time and is actually blown away, like because they were poor or something, and it's like, wow, I get to like fly a jet. But I bet every president we've ever had is just like, oh, whatever, because you have to be rich to run for office.
It seems like likely that if the upper echelons of the government had to go through TSA and the modern airline experience, they would just order the army to just raise everything and start again.
We have a story about that later.
About special treatment. Well, ISPs continue to get away with murder because our regulatory agencies don't do anything about it, and they lobby very successfully. But some cities are so beaten down by that they have to go to these insane lengths, and I wish them the best.
Tired of being ripped off by monopolies, Cleveland launches ambitious plan to provide citywide dirt cheap broadband. This is amazing because Cleveland realizes that they're going to get the bejesus suit out of them by AT&T. So they've actually spent years building documentation and meticulously documenting everything, where AT&T has done things like charge more money for the poorer areas, then when caught say, oh, we're using this for infrastructure upgrades, then not upgrade the infrastructure according to the people in Cleveland. They've done things like take government money for upgrades and then not actually make any substantial upgrades. And some neighborhoods don't even have broadband available. So like every brinksmanship game that you can think of being played to not upgrade infrastructure has happened in Cleveland. Well, they've had enough.
So unfortunately, they still are contracting with third party, but instead of an ISP, the third party will not actually deliver internet service. What they're going to do is just build the entire infrastructure. And then they're going to lease that infrastructure to the normal ISPs. So
that should create opportunity for third-party ISPs to be able to provide service should the larger incumbent ISPs not want to play ball. But we'll see. I have a feeling that they'll probably get sued anyway.
Yeah, no lawsuits yet. I actually checked before we started because I wanted to know, but none yet. I'm sure that they will come.
AT&T will wait until the 11th hour and sue them.
It'll prevent anybody from controlling the infrastructure. So, yeah, you should be able to compete with that. Yeah, they'll do some nasty stuff. But
the argument from AT&T is always like, oh, this is government competing with private business. And it's like, it's not. Okay.
Well, if you're a fan like I am of catfish videos.
Like the fish.
No, the old lady's getting ripped off by Nigerians is what I'm talking about. One of the main avenues they use to get that money to Nigeria is these bad boys right here. And it seems like these people are willing to touch their hand to that hot stove over and over and over. So this seems insane. I don't necessarily agree with this, but I understand why they're doing it.
Scammers exploit Bitcoin ATMs. Will new California laws help crack down on fraud? So because banks have gotten wise to the whole wire transfer thing, now scammers are convincing people with various ruses to take money out of their bank account and use Bitcoin ATMs to send money to the scam.
Maybe I'm just too hillbilly for this. I've never seen a Bitcoin ATM.
They exist.
I mean, it mentions it's in California as well, so maybe that's more common there.
The example here is they convinced an old man that his son had been arrested and they needed money for bail. And so,
he also got, apparently, according to that scam, he also got monkeypox while in jail.
Yeah.
And they're like, we need you to pay for his medical treatment. And he did that too.
So you can still use them, but it's going to be $1,000 per day, I think, limit, which is crazy that people were sending more than that. And this is what we alluded to in terms of special treatment for the government, because here was somebody who was flying commercially, but he happened to be a senator. And I think maybe he went through a special line that didn't get the same scrutiny as everybody else.
Washington State Senator arrested in Hong Kong for carrying a gun through airport. It wasn't loaded, but somehow he got through another airport and landed in Hong Kong and then was like, wait a minute.
None of the security or metal detectors or anything.
No, the TSA completely missed it. And it was just in a briefcase.
Yeah.
It wasn't like hidden away.
Oops.
Are you telling me that all that effort we do is not worth it and it doesn't actually make anyone safer.
Well, that's the other. It's either he gets special treatment or they're as useless as we think they are.
Yeah.
Well, it could be both. I mean, it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. Moving over to Europe, it is a dark, dark week. Pour one out for the freedoms of these poor people.
The UK's controversial online safety bill finally becomes law, as we predicted. That's another level 1 bingo square. Because when this first popped up, it's like, they're going to ram this through. Don't worry. And they totally did.
Received royal assent.
Now, the trick they got it through was it doesn't take effect all at once. They're just going to more slowly boil the frog, as we said they would. So this does include the thing where you're going to need to prove your identity to get on a website that has age restrictions. You can imagine the types of websites that have age restrictions.
There's also the whole breaking encryption thing, which was never resolved, which probably means they're going to break encryption eventually.
This would have never happened underneath Elizabeth.
Can we get have you got a license to get on the
A
internet?
license. You got a license to get on the internet.
And this is, I don't know if this is worse or it's close to the Japanese one. It's insane that, and in this country, we can't look down on this because we're led by corpses as well. Happy Halloween. But this is particularly egregious.
Quote unquote, does he know what Google is? Anger as Italy appoints an 85-year-old AI czar. So it's going to be in charge. It's like, AI is this developing. Let's put this person in charge. It's like,
Astonishing.
What's his home lab like, you wonder?
It's a CPAP machine, a dialysis machine. And another thing that they're trying to do, the EU, not the UK, is trying to push through the scanning all of your devices and scanning all of your cloud stuff to protect the children. Now that has gotten some pushback, and in response to that pushback, some shady practices.
Controversial plan emerges for child abuse stuff.
Oh, wait, let me refresh it. You got a quick window.
Controversial plan to scan private messages. Child abuse meets fresh scandal. This is the EU. So, it's like, oh, we need a third party monitoring your user-to-user private messages because this is the obvious thing no one could argue with. But you don't need that.
But more importantly, some of the proponents of this type of situation ran some ads on social media, and one of the researchers saw them and he was like, that's weird. I haven't seen this ad before. And it was one of those terrifying, scare the old people ads. So he started looking into it and he discovered, I'm not sure how he found this out, they were targeting this ad. And it was like, if you're interested in anything to do with freedom or liberty, don't show them this ad. Because he didn't want those people to see it and get angry about it. Instead, he targeted groups of people that he thought would be very well terrified by the ad and be more likely to. So it's kind of like, yeah, we want to announce what we're doing, but we don't want anybody who would argue with it to ever see it. They also point out that he probably used some of Meta's ad targeting stuff that is currently illegal in the EU, even though he was an EU MP.
Yeah, but he outsourced it to someone who's not in EU, so it's okay.
I don't think that counts anymore with Meta, right? Because they had to move their own stuff over there to get around all the... It's a cat and mouse game.
The other thing here is that the incentive structure is around companies that have stuff in place to be able to support this. They're not actually interested in protecting the children. They're interested in selling an encryption product that, or controlling the thing. It's like, oh, well, you can't have user-to-user communication unless it's through Meta or unless it's through approved application X. Because, God forbid that anybody talk to anybody else.
And Meta is designated as one of those big tech gatekeeper companies in the EU, whatever they're calling that thing. And one company that is also counted, but just vehemently denies, no, we are not big tech. We're mom and pop, is Amazon. They did not succeed in that argument, and now they have some new rules saying that they have to give us the numbers.
The Reuters headline is Amazon discloses 181 million users in the EU in their first store transparency report. Also in that report, they said they have about 150,000 EU employees. Is that right? So I mean, just looking at that from like a salary perspective, that means that Amazon is making what, like 50, 60, $75 per user per year, on the order of $10 a month just to cover salary costs for those 150,000 people.
So they make that easily.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of business. Oh, we're a mom and pop store. That's a
They're a big company.
Let me run down to my little Amazon shop on the corner.
I mean, that's got to be like 2 orders of magnitude more than like Twitter number of users versus income or anything else. And they're moving physical goods. They've got a lot more overhead. So it's got to be like the revenue dollar has to be just crazy.
Well, the smart meters is another way that we are spied upon by the companies that we do business with. But the thing about it is they built those smart meters and they didn't take into account the rampant acceleration of technology. And we have to roll out new stuff every year or people will stop buying these phones. So we're going to face a disaster soon.
Millions of smart meters will brick when it turns off 2G and 3G. As it turns out, alarms and a lot of other stuff that integrated with wireless are 2G or 3G at best. So when those cellular networks shut down, they're gone.
This article felt aggressively British.
It's
like some of the phrasing and stuff, like brick it.
The article author also didn't understand like the spectrum. Like there's a finite amount of spectrum, and we really do need to reclaim the spectrum. But if we look at the overall problem, like can we do this in a sustainable way? Like can we reserve some part of the spectrum for devices that only just need low speed communication and mandate that we have to have that? And I don't think there's a clean way to do that.
Probably should have thought about that when we built those devices, huh?
Yeah. I mean, we're on 5G and we haven't thought about this yet. And it's like, oh, I don't want to be on an upgrade treadmill where I've got to replace all this crap every couple of years. I want something to last 50 years.
Well, that's terrorist talk.
That's not very capitalistic of you.
Speaking of capitalists.
Yeah, India is definitely becoming more capitalist. They're looking to grow that middle class. They're looking to do what China did when they opened up to the world. But according to this fella, who is a business leader in India, he says they have one big problem.
Murthy says that India's work culture must change. Youngsters should work 70 hours a week to compete in the global economy. I think maybe he's starting high and hoping they'll meet in the middle.
I have no comment about that because violence.
Yeah, hopefully he will not get his way. And the de-dollarization of the world is a terrifying thing for us Americans. Now, I can understand if you're not American that you might be for this because it is kind of an unfair advantage that we have. But we really need that advantage because without it, that crippling debt that we have?
We're a little biased on this one, but
that's going to be a big problem, all that interest that we owe.
PetroChina completes its first international crude oil trade in digital yuan, according to this report.
They didn't say who it was with.
Yeah.
Did they? I thought they didn't.
It's from a bourse. So, I mean, it's not necessarily all from the same place, I don't think.
It says did not disclose the seller's identity.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just through a market. But they didn't convert it to dollars, which is why everybody buys dollars. And if you don't need to do that anymore, they're going to stop. China has also escalated the trade war. We already had 2 Gs that we needed. Now we got 3 Gs that we need, and we're not going to get.
China restricts exports of graphite as it escalates a global tech war. This is interesting. Graphite, it's just carbon. It's just really pure carbon. Like that's not, but they've got really amazing production facilities for producing this. This is like what's in a pencil. And they
batteries,
said,
more importantly.
They literally said we're citing national security concerns, but anybody could make graphite. They're just not set up to. But if you look at like export percentages and a whole bunch of other things, it's like, which thing, if we stopped exporting, would do the most damage? It was that. So economic damage, I mean. So you think it's one of those things where it's like our economy is hurting, we're going to hurt your economy kind of thing?
Well, we definitely had something to do with their economy hurting.
Yeah.
Huawei might have some thoughts on that.
The import of GPUs, tech acceleration, a lot of things.
And Japan is not a name that we see as often when it comes to going after big tech, but maybe they're catching up.
Google faces antitrust probe in Japan for pushing search default. So Japan is looking at this, and a lot of juicy tidbits are coming out of this. Like, hey, wait a minute, you're literally paying them not to use a competitor, basically. Well, it's like, nah, it's not that.
It's not what you think.
I mean, it effectively is that, but we didn't arrive there directly. We took this indirect path. It's fine.
And an indirect path is what this cable will be traveling, because it's going from Australia to the US, but it's going to take a lot of detours and connect a lot of people.
Google to run internet cables to the Pacific Islands and Australia-US deal. So this is going to elevate the state of the art for the connection in these Pacific Islands. And who knows, might be a new source for remote IT workers.
Papua New Guinea was listed in here, and I was like, wow, I guess they would have internet, but like, I've heard that's one of the most remote places in the world. Imagine getting like a good internet connection there after just living there your entire life.
Be fantastic.
Front row seats for the apocalypse. With a good internet
Yeah,
connection.
you start doom scrolling, and it's like, oh, I don't want to see this anymore.
And it's the global worker, right? The Klaus Schwab is, he's so excited about this. He wants people to just be global citizens. National borders don't mean anything. You're a citizen of the world, but there are some pitfalls when it comes to that.
Thousands of remote IT workers sent wages to North Korea to help fund weapons program, FBI says. This is not the headline that I would have chosen for this story. That is accurate, but it's a deeply misleading headline. The real headline is companies hired absurdly cheap IT workers, and those IT workers, it turned out, were North Korean. And so they were paying North Koreans to do their IT work, but the North Koreans weren't stealing their stuff or anything like that. They were just doing the IT work cheaply.
Yeah, I mean, technically, they just got a job. They probably lied about where they're from, but
Yeah.
they got a job, they got paid for it, and they filtered all that money back to North Korea. They did not come from North Korea. I mean, the people did, but they moved to China and Russia to disguise all of that. So,
And got fake paperwork and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
but the North Korean government was likely sponsoring all of that in order to funnel the money back into the government.
I kind of wondered if they were just is this like an excuse for companies not to let remote workers think. It's like, oh, because the FBI and the remote workers, we can't hire remote workers anymore.
I'm sure it'll be used
Yeah.
too. But see, these same companies, maybe not, because they want that international, because they don't want to pay Americans.
That's true.
They want to be able to go. So actually, I don't know where they would land on this.
What way can they screw us over better? It's hard
I
to
think
say.
if you went to Amazon and you're like, listen, Amazon, you're going to save this much this quarter, but North Korea might get a little money. They'd be like, I'm fine with that.
That's not even the worst thing I've done this morning.
Yeah.
That's literally been the board conversation at least 2 or 3 times. This just today in New York City somewhere. It's like, oh, we're going to outsource this because of these uncertain economic times. And it's like, but some of the workers may be working for countries on the sanction list. It's like,
Let's go get lunch.
yeah.
What? I didn't hear that. All right, meeting's over.
Make sure that's not in the minutes.
Moving on to cybersecurity, there was one huge story in cybersecurity last week, and that was Okta.
Okta cybersecurity breach wipes out more than $2 billion on its market cap. And this also has spilled over and affected other companies like 1Password and others. Okta Identity Management, who knew that they would be a high-profile target for hackers? Oh, no. 1Password discloses a security incident linked to the Okta breach. It turns out centralizing services on the internet, bad idea.
And Okta manages logins and that kind of thing. So it's the worst possible part of your supply chain to get impacted. We're going to hear more about that as time goes on. We will see the true scope of it. I'm sure we have not yet. And facial recognition search engines that have proven to be inaccurate and awful and invasive. And some people were like, hey, we need to get rid of this for the children. But unlike all the other arguments for the children, they were just like, nah, we just won't do it for the children.
Massive facial recognition search engine now blocks searches for children's faces. I thought children's faces were hard to search in the first place, and there's nothing about that in here.
because then you have to admit that maybe it doesn't work in some cases. They was doing it before. And if you are a Mac user, here's a nasty new kind of exploit that you don't really even have to participate much in. You just have to go to a web page.
Hackers can force iOS and macOS browsers to divulge passwords and much more. Yeah.
Basically just runs another hidden web page and then loads. So if you're already logged in the browser to Gmail, for example, which, is something everybody who uses Gmail does, it's going to load Gmail in a hidden page and scrape the screen contents of it. So you're already logged in. It's able to read your mail. Not necessarily like click and open a mail, but to see your inbox.
Chrome, I think, was hardened against this, but not Safari.
Never Safari.
And it's interesting that, usually we are against the hacks, but NPR are kind of celebrating this one.
Ukrainian hackers and Intel officers partner in an apparent hack of a top Russian bank, where interest rates have soared to 15%.
This was, what was the name of this bank?
Not something we can pronounce, probably.
Anyway, this was Alfa-Bank. This was sort
Never
of
mind.
like the rich Russian bank.
Oh, okay.
So they're hitting them where they know that it will actually bother them.
Have you watched any more of the Adorables? Have they been posting at all?
They're in Turkey now.
Are they permanently there?
I don't think so. But they did a lot of videos on how much you can buy with the dollar now that the Russian currency has collapsed.
Yeah.
Those were fun.
Oh. I was hoping maybe they would just get out. I would be a little afraid to stay, but
It's weird because they were definitely posting from Russia at
Yeah.
some point, which the YouTube, I guess they relaxed that or...
I have no idea. I know some artists I follow are Russian, and a lot of them have stopped posting, which I assumed was related.
You got this headline? I can give you a tactical reload if you need
Yeah,
it.
tactical reload.
All
Be
right.
good.
So, lost Bitcoin. You've experienced this.
Yes.
Lost Bitcoin. If you have a bunch of Bitcoin and like you just don't know the password, how frustrating is it? This guy has millions, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, and that motivates a lot of people.
They cracked the code on a locked USB drive worth $235 million in Bitcoin. Then it got weird. The guy that has it won't let them crack his. Like, they demonstrated that they have the capability to crack the security on this hardware device because time has moved on since the hardware device. But he won't let them do it. Presumably because in the future it'll be even easier.
Well, he claims he's already made a deal. So it's the Iron Key. If you remember, the Iron Key was like a special USB device, and if you try to hack it, it'll actually delete itself. So he had 3 Iron Keys because he had a lot of Bitcoin. He wanted to back up. He's destroyed 2 of them trying to hack them. So these guys have a proof of concept. They've hacked an unrelated Iron Key and proved that they got the message off of it. But he says, no, I can't let you do that because I've already made a handshake deal with these other people. So he probably will get it eventually. If his current team fails, what percentage do you think they'll ask for? What would you ask for?
25%.
Seems fair. And Chrome is doing some things to hide our precious IP addresses.
Google Chrome's new IP protection will hide users' IP addresses. It'll basically do that thing that we've been saying to do for years, which is, set up a Linode VPN, use our affiliate link below, and just have all your traffic go through that. Except now all of your traffic is going to go out a random Google endpoint instead of your own, because why not?
Which they definitely won't be looking at.
Yeah,
Never.
definitely not.
For sure not going to update your Google ad profile with all of that information. It's kind of like the Apple thing, right? No one gets to spy but us.
It's this is also useful sometimes from a traffic and peering standpoint, because sometimes you can turn outbound traffic into inbound traffic. Consider the case of Netflix. Now all of your traffic to Netflix in a browser could actually be going to Google, not Netflix. And so now can Google negotiate with Netflix? Or does Google offset, like they've got inbound traffic to their data center when historically a lot of their traffic was outbound?
Well, if you are a Google user, maybe you use Chrome, and you've got to watch out for a new nasty tactic.
The fake browser update scam gets a makeover.
This is not a real update page. If you see this, if you see a website telling you that you have to update in order to see the website, that's a scam. Don't do that. Because they will try to get you to, oh, here's another flowchart. The cool thing about this, I guess, well, cool, the impressive thing about this is they use a Binance smart contract to do it. They're hosting the malware on the Binance blockchain.
Neat.
I'm expecting a senator to speak out against Binance next week. It's like, whoa, I got to shut this down. They're using it for this. And here's another thing that I expect to be shut down. I can't believe that they're still selling this. The only reason they're still selling this is because nobody in government understands what this is.
Flipper Zero can now spam Android and Windows users with Bluetooth alerts. This is so cool. Actually, the software-defined radio thing, we should do a video on this. Like, just setting up a little listener thing at your house is amazing. You can pick up all kinds of people's phones and know how people move in and around your office and your house. And it's like, oh, I've seen that MAC address before. Oh, I've seen that MAC address before. Oh, interesting.
Oh, they also broadcast plain text.
Yeah.
My neighbor's CPAP machine broadcast itself.
It's like a more high-tech version of the police scanner that everyone wants to have.
Well, you can also use it for police radio if you can decrypt it. And the Kia boys are still out there. How long has this been going on? It's been a couple of years now, right?
Yeah.
It feels like ages.
And it's taken this long for them to come up with any kind of solution. I wonder how effective this one will be.
Hyundai to hold software upgrade clinics, quote unquote, across the U.S. for vehicles targeted by thieves.
Like a spay and neuter clinic, but for your car.
Yeah. So these are going to pop up in like empty parking lots on weekends. If you are a Kia user, and they've got all the models here. And I was surprised they were still having this problem in 2022.
How long, though, before the thieves pop up in the middle of Detroit and says, like, oh, we got a clinic, and they're really just putting a tracker on your car so they can steal it later?
Or, like you show up to the clinic and there's obviously going to be a line, right? Because there's a lot of these, and you're like, oh, I'm just going to pop over and grab a sandwich. And they clean out the parking lot. Where can we go that we know cars don't have immobilizers? Ah, yes.
Oh, this is probably my favorite story this week.
And, this is just a fun Mozilla Halloween experience. They're spooking us with digital privacy.
Welcome to Mozilla's first ever annual consumer creepometer. In the state of 2023, the state of our digital privacy is very creepy.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm feeling creeped.
We talk about the man in the middle, like the Snoopers Charter is basically a thing in the UK at this point. But how long? I mean, the same arguments would apply to a smart speaker in your house or literally any piece of technology in your house. It's like, listen, your Samsung television or your LG television is capable of detecting child abuse in the home. We have to co-opt those devices to look for child abuse.
Is that your watch?
So you have a Garmin.
I've got the Venue 2.
Oh.
There's
That's probably similar though, right? That was one of the winners.
There's a quiz at the top of the page that's like, select what smart items you have, and I had none, and it was like, wow, good job.
Yeah, I've actually done the whole, like, this thing it is kind of chatty on the internet, and some of it's encrypted, but it is nowhere near as bad as Mom's Apple Watch. I was shocked at how much data is reported back to Apple.
Wait, what'd you say the name of it was?
Venue 2.
Oh, okay.
Why?
Well, I thought you said Gizmo, and I was like, well, that's the worst one. Also, how depressing that BetterHelp, which is a
mental health app,
psychology thing, is apparently just reporting all of the things that you
It's
tell
going
them.
to advertise so that way you can shop your sadness away.
My other favorite thing about the watch is it keeps me healthy. It's like, I've done a lot of cardio this week, and I look down and it's like, no, you haven't. It's like, okay, I'll get back on the elliptical.
Okay, watch.
100% of cars failed.
That makes sense to me. Modern cars, anyway.
Yeah.
40% of mental health apps reviewed have gotten worse.
Yeah.
I am sufficiently spooked.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
We'll see you tomorrow.